Hello, now that I've used the ZA13-C for about 2.5 weeks, I'm ready to do a full review. In this time, this mouse has only felt better and better for me, and I've been really enjoying my time with it. It is an absolute banger. The shape feels incredible for claw, and I think that it is Zowie's current best mouse, and easily one of my personal favorite mice in general. It actually blows my mind that this is Zowie's least popular mouse line. So today, I want to convince you about why the ZA13-C should be your next pickup, over the rest of Zowie's other lines and other mice currently on the market. Alright, firstly, we need to talk about the shape. It is always the most important part about any mouse, but this is especially true for the ZA13-C, because its unique design is what makes it so special. You can see here that it has a very high profile back and a large hump, with a thin and low front. Other mice have attempted similar designs like the XM1 and M710, which I will compare to this mouse later, but nothing else quite creates the same hand feel that the ZA13-C does. And it's also this huge contrast between its highest and lowest points that makes this mouse so excellent for claw in my opinion. It's able to combine a big hump for supporting your hand, but also having a small front to give you a very precise, very controlled feel. This should be extremely natural for a very wide variety of claw grippers, and it feels like exactly what you want for this specific grip style. I do think that it should be somewhat usable for other grips, but it's really not that optimal. For example, in fingertip, this hump is going to be very awkward. It's going to start impacting your hand and restricting your range of motion unnecessarily. There are much better, much smaller, and much more low-profile mice that will suit you better for this grip style. Then for palm grip, you'll need absolute baby hands because you have very little room on the right side here to place your fingers. Your fingers will likely end up bleeding off and falling off the edge a little bit, which is going to feel comfortable and you're going to lack that stability that palm grip normally brings. But if you do claw grip, this feels like one of the best shapes out there, easily. It feels so high performance and should be pretty versatile for a few variations of claw grip styles. It really is something special. Alright, so now to dive into some of the nitty gritties, the first place you should always start with is the hump. It is the most important part for any sort of claw grip centric shape, and especially on the ZA13-C. A lot of other mice and almost all other claw grip centric mice do feature a prominent hump, but the ZA series mice takes this to the next level. On a mouse of its stature, this hump feels oversized. Overall, just based on hand feel, I would say that every other part of this mouse besides the hump actually feels pretty small. To me, it pretty easily feels like the smallest mouse out of Zowie's whole lineup. Of course, the large hump does make it feel a little bit larger than an actually small mouse like the Viper Mini, so I will say that it is more of like a small medium rather than a true small. But then in contrast to its overall smaller stature, its hump is very tall and fairly wide. For reference, it is a little bit taller in the back than Zowie's own S2, and even just a touch taller than the endgame gear XM1, a mouse that is known for having a very large, very prominent hump. So this hump is genuinely large, and easily on par with a generally larger feeling hump-focused mice. The hump width is much more standard though, for reference, just about as large as the S2, so it doesn't actually fill out your palm in a very wide, very bulky way like something like the XM1 would do. Instead, it gets most of its bulky feel from being so tall that it reaches up to contact the middle portion of your palm. The top of the hump is also very well rounded with these nice smooth curves that help facilitate creating a lot of hand contact comfortably. I feel that most people when they claw grip this mouse will end up resting their palm on top of the hump in a fairly relaxed manner. This sort of grip where you very naturally plop your hand down and wrap it over the hump, it should feel very natural and works out pretty well for this mouse overall. You could pretty easily wrap your hand around these nice smooth curves and easily get contact deep in this middle portion of your palm. Yet the mouse is so tall in the back here that it should end up hitting a pretty high portion of your palm right underneath your knuckles here. You won't quite get that breathing room they do in other shapes where this top portion of your palm makes relatively little contact, and instead it'll get this secure contact that extends all the way up to the very top portions of your hand. This high amount of contact all up and down your entire palm will give a high amount of stability and allow your grip to feel very locked in. I think that this will be the main appeal of this mouse for the majority of people. It feels really good to have something that is so stable for these large swipes. The mouse won't move around in your hand much at all, and I do feel that my initial accuracy is very great when I have this much stability. Although you will still feel pretty restricted for finger motions when you do make this much palm contact. It is almost impossible to feel this locked in without sacrificing some sort of mobility. So be aware that if you do claw grip this where you just plop your hand on top of the mouse, you will likely experience a lot of restriction for your inner hand finger motions. So while this grip was pretty viable for me, and it is pretty similar to what I would use on some other mice, like the EZ2 for example, I still do greatly prefer my own normal pincher style grip for this mouse. And I do think that this shape works very well for this style as well. Like I said before, despite how this aggressive design may look, I still do think that this mouse does work well for a pretty wide variety of different claw grip styles. So what I do in my normal pincher grip is that I squeeze the side of the hump with these two outside areas of my palm, and then I pretty aggressively curl my fingers to pull it back into my hand. Here I feel that the hump is wide enough to limit contact in this middle portion of my palm. This helps to make the hump feel far less restrictive and invasive for me when it doesn't make contact in this middle portion. I still do feel that I get a lot of stability in this grip though, and I don't really trade off much. I am able to follow these nice gentle, pretty high profile curves on the sides of the hump, which actually does allow me to make a pretty good amount of palm contact despite this middle portion being completely free. I feel that the mouse ends up making contact in these little strips on my palm, instead of invading this entire middle portion. It is super easy to get a lot of stability as well as a very solid grip in my normal pincher style on the ZA13 shape. In this pincher style, unlike the more traditional claw grip, I do feel that I have a very good range of motion. This is because the back slopes so quickly up it feels a little bit cut off. When I make these vertical motions and change the angle of my hand, I don't actually feel it impacting this very bottom portion of my palm. I do get a surprisingly large vertical range of motion on a hump that is so tall and so large. Initially, I did actually think this hump was a little bit bulky. This is something that I did mention in my initial impressions video. But after I did learn to back off the hump just a little bit more, I was rewarded with much more inner hand freedom. And that is entirely due to the back of this mouse feeling almost cut off. For example, I actually feel much more restricted on the FK2 due to how the back slopes off to a pretty sharp point. This back point of the mouse ends up hitting the heel of my palm during any sort of vertical movement, which does make the mouse feel very restrictive, despite it having such a smaller hump than the ZA13-C overall. So overall, this hump does feel very good in my normal pincher style claw grip. It offers a great balance of both support and mobility. Although I will say that it does lean a little bit more into support for me, because the hump does feel very prominent and it makes a pretty good amount of hand contact. But I certainly don't feel restricted or have any problems with this hump at all. This balance of both support and mobility is always what I look for in a hump, and this certainly provides that in spades. Alright, so while the strangely small front isn't as important as the hump for the shape, it is still the other half that makes it so unique and stand out amongst other claw-centric mice. Like I said before, the front of this mouse is quite small. For reference, it is very similar to the Viper Mini that I pulled out earlier in terms of grip width and also button height, with the ZA13-C actually being slightly lower than the Viper Mini at the front. This is pretty strange for a large humped mouse, so it almost feels like two mice were smashed together when making the shape. In terms of hand feel, this makes the ZA13-C feel very aggressive. It feels like you have to wrap your hand around this oversized hump and then pull your fingers together to get a pretty narrow grip. This may seem pretty strange, but it is actually not nearly as uncomfortable as some other thin grip mice that I've used in the past. This is largely due to the sides of the mouse having these very nice, gentle, swooping curves with a good amount of concavity. This allows you to get a very solid grip when you place your fingers on the side of the mouse, instead of forcing you to have to squeeze the mouse with some force in order to get some sort of security in your grip. So despite how curled my fingers are when I grip the ZA13, I still feel that it can be very relaxed, which greatly helps with comfort. The NP01S is another mouse with a pretty similarly thin and low front. But on this shape in particular, I sometimes find that my grip ends up being a little bit too uncomfortable, because I do have to both aggressively curl my fingers and squeeze the sides of the mouse pretty hard in order to get a proper, solid grip. Because I don't have that same nice concavity on this right side that I do on the ZA13. And instead of being able to very naturally place my fingers and pick up the mouse well, I have to use a decent amount of force and squeeze the sides in order to be able to pick the mouse up properly. So these very gently swooping concave sides are huge for making the ZA13-C feel more comfortable and locked in. Initially, I did feel that the thin and low front was a little bit awkward and uncomfortable during large movements, but once I did learn how relaxed I can make my fingers and still get a proper grip on this mouse, I instantly became far more comfortable and I don't run into any of those issues anymore. This aggressive feel of the thin and low front that I was talking about I feel greatly helps with my precision. This thin and low front allows me to incorporate my fingers into my aim quite a bit. It activates all the muscles on my hand when I'm able to bring my fingers very close together to aim. I have a very precise, almost tool-esque feel when I'm using this mouse. The ZA13 shape feels especially fantastic for a correction type aim. It is super easy to make an initial movement, then correct your crosshair placements by incorporating your fingers. It feels so natural, so intuitive, and so precise. This is where I feel most of the high performance of the shape comes from. It is such an excellent balance of both precision and support that I feel greatly facilitates consistent, reliable, high performance aim. And the shape is comfortable as well. It might take a little bit of getting used to due to how unique the shape is. For me personally, the mouse did feel awkward for about a week, but I am pretty confident they will be able to adapt to a grip that feels very comfortable and very consistent for you. Like this mouse shape all around is just incredible. It has so much to offer you and it feels so balanced without really sacrificing much. This is why I feel that it is pretty easily the best Zowie shape if you are a claw gripper. Nothing else in the lineup, or really anything else on the market currently, can quite offer such a balanced, universal mouse. I can kind of see why it is the least popular Zowie line, because every other mouse in the lineup does work better than the ZA series at balancing between different grip styles, but claw is still the most popular grip, so I still have a hard time seeing why this mouse is so under the radar, and why it took them so long to finally update it. Still though, I'm glad that they finally got to it, because I have been really enjoying this mouse, and it is easily one of my favorite options out there. The ZA13 is not going to replace the ZA13-C as my current main, because this mouse is confidence incarnated for me, but still this will absolutely be a shape that I will keep coming back to. And if the ZA13 didn't exist, this would so easily be my main. Alright, now finally just a quick rundown of some of the basic features. First of all, I did actually have a build quality issue on my unit. This left side panel here, I do have some noticeable flex when I apply pressure. It feels like the outer shell bends in and clicks in against something on the inside of the mouse. However, I was actually able to find a partial fix. If you remove the back mouse gate here and tighten the screw underneath, it will actually work to reset this bottom plate and remove some of the side flex. It did not completely go away and I do still notice it, but only when I'm actually looking for it. In game, using my much more relaxed grip, I don't notice it whatsoever, and it feels completely fine. I actually completely forgot about this issue until I was doing this review. I was able to go over a week of use without even having to think about it. If you also have the side flex issue, which I have heard others talk about, I would recommend tightening out this bottom screw. It probably won't completely fix the issue, but it will at least make it better. And now the coating, just like the rest of the C series, it is rubberized and it feels premium and very grippy. It will certainly pick up oils quite well and look extremely dirty, but personally I do think that it is worth the trade-off because it is a very nice feeling, very grippy coating, especially for sweaty hands. Now the cable, once again, just like the rest of the C series. And now the cable, once again, is just like the rest of the C series, so it should be perfectly fine. It is very flexible and has a nice amount of give to it. However, it is still pretty floppy, so you will need decent management to eliminate some of this extra slack. But once you do that, you should have no issues with this in-game, and it feels great to use. And now onto the clicks, I personally think that these are an absolute strong suit. They are very light and very snappy feeling. They have a great amount of tactility and are very easily spammable and feel crisp and highly responsive. They also have a nice amount of well-tensioned post-travel that I feel makes them bouncy and very premium feeling. There is also a good amount of pre-travel as well, but personally this is not an issue for me at all. They're so light that I can pretty easily slam the clicks down and not feel this pre-travel at all. They're so light that I can pretty easily slam the clicks and not notice the pre-travel. This will still of course bother some people though, so be careful. And now the side buttons, they feel pretty solid. They are well positioned and well shaped right underneath my thumb. However, I do think that people with very big or very bulky thumbs will end up running out of room on the side here, and probably impacting the buttons when they don't want them to. But to me, they feel good. The actual tactile response isn't that satisfying, but they did do a pretty good job of eliminating most pre and post travel. And now the scroll, I personally like it, but this will absolutely be a preference thing. This is the type of wheel that is very tactile, with extremely well-defined steps. I really like the feel of these types of wheels personally, but they do come with a lot of noise. But if you are able to get over that, I do think that this wheel does feel pretty good. It is a solid implementation of the very tactile, very well-defined steps wheel. Finally, onto the black stock feet. Honestly, they actually feel pretty good to me. Once you break them in, they do have a very smooth, pretty premium feeling glide. They might end up feeling a little bit too high friction for you if you are used to aftermarket skates, but that really is the only fault of them. They work great on a wide variety of surfaces and honestly feel pretty solid overall. They are super thin, so if you are using something like an Artisan Extra Soft and you apply a little bit of downward pressure, you will notice some scraping into the pad. But really, despite that, no complaints. I have been coming around to the Zowie stock skates and liking them more and more over time. Alright, that about does it. This mouse is crazy good and should absolutely be on your radar. It is such a good claw grip shape, I cannot overstate that enough. It is easily one of my favorite mice out there, no question. And my next couple of videos will likely be roundups of some of my favorite mice and pads. So I hope to see you all in those ones.